Why did John the Baptist end up in jail? That's what we're going to talk about today in Matthew 11. Hi, everyone. This is Jill from the Northwoods. Thank you for joining me again. I appreciate you watching this. We're coming off the Sermon on the Mount. We're somewhere around year 29, and now Jesus, in the last chapter, called his apostles. We restart this particular chapter in John the Baptist, and it turns out he's in prison and heard what Jesus was doing and sent a message to the disciples, his disciples, because he wanted to know from Jesus, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect somebody else? Meaning, are you the Messiah? Are you the one we've been waiting for? Keep in mind, John is the first cousin of Jesus. We don't know how close they were, but obviously Mary and Elizabeth were close. John started his ministry before Jesus. He's been out there preaching that this is coming, that the Messiah, the kingdom of God is coming. And now he must be hearing words that Jesus is curing people, healing people from the dead. Then Jesus says, "Blessed is the one who is not offended by me." People were taking offense, and they are not the fortunate ones. Remember, blessed means fortunate, happy. And so he talks to the crowd, and I'm sure everyone is interested because John is a known entity for a long time. And Jesus started his mission with John and the baptism. So people are going to know about this and know what happened. And if you think about Israel or this area, I get the idea. I always said, and I don't know how true it is that it's somewhat like the size of Illinois cut in half. The word gets around very quickly. So when John has these followers and asks them this question, the message gets back to Jesus. Jesus says that when you go out and look at John, does he look like a wimpy guy, someone who's going to get blown around by the wind? Do you see a soft man, someone dressed nicely in luxurious clothing, living in a giant house? You saw a prophet. You saw more than just a prophet, because he's the one who was written about. Behold, I send my messenger who's going to prepare the way for you. John is that messenger. He is going to be not Elijah, but the Elijah for Jesus, who is announcing the Messiah is here. He has finally come and preparing people's heart for this big event that was happening. And people would understand that. They would understand that this means the Messiah is coming, and they waited for the Messiah. They've been waiting for this news forever. And we're going to find out later, because some people did ask, is John Elijah? And no, John is not Elijah. He is an Elijah-like character, preparing the way. What this all means is when you look at John, he's not wimpy. He's not blowing in the wind, changing his opinion to please the crowd. He's not a man of luxury. He's not living a life in a giant house with great clothes. He is living in the wilderness. He's going to get that message out. And when I was reading more about this, essentially what this means is that he's saying that there's no greater man on earth than John the Baptist. John the Baptist is one of the greatest men, yet it says he is one of the least in the kingdom of heaven. Well, what does that mean? Why would John be the least in the kingdom of heaven? And that's because he is not going to be in this next phase. He is not going to see the death and resurrection of Jesus. So he is, like I said, feels like this Old Testament prophet, the living in the before time. He's going to be in the kingdom of heaven. Don't worry there. It just means that he is not going to see this eventual sacrifice that Jesus is going to bring to everyone, the suffering he's going to do. He is going to not see what happens next. He lets them know that the kingdom of heaven, and this is going to be a confusing time. I spent a lot of time doing research about it, but they'll talk about how heaven suffered violence because people are trying to take it by force. And it seems that it means that people are going to try to scramble to get into heaven, whichever means they can, entering it as a rush, almost like a lifeboat. They're going to rush to this kingdom of heaven. And up to this point, it was all the law. Everything was the law. And we talk about this in Ephesians, a little bit of a spoiler alert, but the law is there not to make you holy, but to tell you what you did wrong. A scale is not to make you healthy, but to tell you how much you weigh. A speed limit is not to make sure that you're not lawbreakers, but in fact causes more law breaking as you break the law. You drive faster than you should, that kind of thing. So before all of this was talking about the law. And he goes on to talk about the generations and that they're like children sitting around, goofing around in a marketplace. And this is another interesting quote. It says that we played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We sang a dirge, which is a sad song, and you didn't mourn. Meaning we talked about the joyful times. The flute being played is like a flute at the wedding. We told you happy things. You weren't happy about it. We sang sad songs and you weren't even mournful about it. You're children, you're shallow. And boy, this is a hard message for this generation, telling them that they didn't do these things. And goes back to John saying, John didn't eat or drink and you hated him. He hated bugs, right? He was out in the countryside eating bugs and he wasn't drinking wine or being gluttonous and you hated him. Then you call me a glutton because I eat and drink with sinners and I hang out with all sorts of different people. And that's going to be a hard message, I think, to hear, is that there's no pleasing you. You would be mad at me if I starved myself and you'd be mad at me if I ate and drank. There's no winning. And he's just going around and telling people, forgive each other, be merciful for each other, and yet getting rejected. Then it's mentioned that he gets rejected in 2 towns, Chorazin and Bethsaida. We don't know exactly where Bethsaida is, but I think we're getting a good idea of it. But they're going to be close to Capernaum. They're going to be close to the Sea of Galilee. And they rejected him. And he says, you know what? It's going to be better for Phoenician towns, which is going to be north. It's going to be on the coast. It's going to be more towards where Lebanon and Syria are, Sidon. These are not believers in God. They were Canaanites. Phoenicians were Canaanites after lots of DNA testing and exploration. It's going to be better for them than these towns because they scorned me. They had this chance to literally see what I was doing there, and they turned me away. And then he goes on to talk about Capernaum, which is his headquarters. And he said, are you going to be exalted in heaven? You're going to be brought down to Hades. I did my ministry. I was stationed here. I did all these miracles. If all these things happened in Sodom, if I went to Sodom and did all these things, that town would still be standing here. But instead, you turned me away. You rejected me. You had everything. They got to see everything. And yet, they rejected Jesus. And that judgment is going to be on them too. And he goes on to say that he's thankful to God in heaven that he hid all these things that he's been doing from the wise people and revealed them yet to children. All the smart people of the world, all the scribes and the lawyers and the educated people, they're rejecting Jesus. Probably a lot to do with their pride, probably has a lot to do with the fact that they think they're better. They think that anyone worthy is going to come into Jerusalem, going to be worshiping at the temple. They probably don't want their power threatened by a Messiah. They don't want the people to get in an uproar over something little like the Messiah coming back to earth. And instead he says children, meaning the unwise, the uneducated. This story was revealed to them, but not to the wise. Uneducated little children understood it when you didn't. Whew. And it makes me think, what if the Messiah, not coming again, but had come to this time, and instead of going to Washington, D.C. or New York, some important town, going to the universities, talking to the very smart people, he went to where I grew up in the Northwoods, backwater. Nobody's from up there. In fact, someone said to me once, you're from up there? I didn't think people lived up there. Yeah, people lived up there. And started the Messiah going up to those people, talking to people who didn't have more than an 8th grade education, and they got it. They understood it. And all the people in the New York City and Washington, D.C. and all the university centers are like, well, we would be the people who could judge who the Messiah is. We're smart. Too much over their skis. They get too high and mighty for everything. Their knowledge is making them prideful. And then they start thinking, we got to take this guy out. He's going to spread dissent. He's going to make the people turn against us. A lot of times, too, the people in the temple structure were worried that if there was an uproar among the people, the Romans would crack down and start doing bad things. That's exactly what happened in 90 AD because of the Bar Kokhba revolution or revolt. And so they don't want anything happening. They don't want anyone getting upset. And now they're also scoffing at him, too. So now they're like, we got to take this guy out. And the leadership, they're ready for it. They're ready to do these actions. They just probably at this point don't know how they're going to do this. And then so he goes on to say that all these things are handed to me by my Father. I know everything he knows. He knows everything I know. And come to me, everyone who labors, works, everyone who is heavy laden with burdens, not just, working burdens, but just in life. And I'll give you rest. Take up my yoke, for I am gentle, lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Reading these passages about yokes, because there's going to be more yoke passages coming out there, a couple of different things is that when you were training a young ox, you put them in a yoke with an older ox, and then the older ox would take on the heavier burden and train the younger, weaker ox. And he's saying that you put us together in a yoke, you put us together in a team, and my burden is going to be gentle, and I'm going to give you rest. Lean on me, and I will be there for you. And these phrases, like I said, they're hard for us because we don't live in an agricultural society at the same time. But to people then, they would have gotten it. And that's why I think this Bible study is so good to do, I think, from a layperson's point of view. Educated people in the Bible, fantastic. I've learned a lot from them. But I also think it's easy to look at the Bible as just regular, common people that understand just the burden of the normal man, paying taxes, working every day, having a hard yoke, who's heavy laden. Like I said, not necessarily just in work, but just even in life too. This is going to be hard. He's going to make that burden light for them. And in the end, he's bringing people back to the kingdom of heaven. He's going to make a bigger family. He's going to bring people back to him. And he understands not just the smart people in the world, but the everybody people in the world. The Northwoods people, the people everywhere, all the people who are disliked. That's who Jesus is coming for, the light and the disliked alike. And so what I'm going to meditate on is this comparison of John in a couple of different ways. That he's a reed that's not shaken by the wind. He's a strong man, but is also least in the kingdom of heaven. John is the reed that stands tall, stands firm in his words, in his message to people. And the essential message of John, too, is that the people who are going to be after John are fortunate because they're going to see the kingdom of heaven coming to earth. They're going to know what happens next, and John is just never going to see that. And so my prayer has to do with all the people who labor under heavy burdens, who feel forgotten and persecuted and ignored by the world. This message is for them. And I think, too, when I feel unqualified to talk about the message of God, that's where I need to take that yoke and learn from him. Let him lead the way and have him teach me. Because, again, his yoke is easy. I always have to remember that whenever I'm feeling that overburdened self, that overwhelmed self, to go to that yoke. And what I'm going to share with other people, there's going to be times when you feel forgotten, burdened, beaten down, not listened to, and that's when you have to go back to Jesus. Put that yoke on with him and let yourself rest in him. Sometimes we're going to be rejected. Sometimes we're going to get the message across, but every time Jesus is going to be right there with us so that we can lean on him and learn from him. All right, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate you listening. Remember that you can always email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps. I would love to hear from you. If you have a prayer, if you need someone to pray for you, you can put it in the channel here, or you could just email me and I'm happy to pray for you. I appreciate your prayers too. I think doing a Bible study, while the Bible is written for the common man, can be difficult at times. I appreciate your prayers so that I do a good job with this. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful week.